live again. I can't believe it. I got the worst internet today, so we'll have to see how we go. If not, we'll come back. I got the most beautiful, wonderful guest here today, Sarah, and she'll tell you more about herself shortly. She is an accountant by training, has her own company, and knows a lot about what it means to be financially stable in business and how to achieve it. So Sarah, no further ado, this is all about learning and growing together. So I'd love to hear from you and for you to introduce yourself first as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Look, I spent 15 years in corporate accounting, so top tier, mid-tier firms, and actually got fired for taking a holiday for my birthday. That's how my business came about. And it was actually the universe's way of sort of saying, well, if you're not going to do this on your own, Sarah, we're just going to kind of really push you that way quite quickly and quite severely. So it was actually the best thing that ever happened. And now that I run my business, so Bond Financial, we're both tax agents, so we do all the lodgement side of things. But the other side of the business is what we call outsourced CFO. So that can be either helping you to run your business because you don't have a finance team, it's probably just you. Or if you do have a finance team, then we can actually help to supplement that, whether that's either helping to review what they do and keeping them sort of accountable, or dealing directly with the founders and the management team to actually help you to understand your numbers, to make sense of them. And again, a lot of the work we do is kind of as accountability buddies, and actually keeping you accountable to either, milestones, action items, KPIs, that sort of thing, to keep you on track.
I love that. And I think from my perspective, I may know what I'm, know the stuff that I'm good at, that I'm selling, but when it comes to running a business financially, it's a lot harder than you realize, right? Especially when you set up a company from a sole trader to a company, there's a lot more that you have to think about and how to maintain yourself in business, because cash flow is obviously king and it's hard when you're a small business.
Yeah, and look, you don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, I haven't seen anywhere in our educational system. I've done a bachelor's. I've then spent 2 years in a postgrad chartered accountancy program. So without that sort of financial education, you don't get that anywhere else in our schooling. So a lot of people come to me with the same and say the same thing. They're like, I don't know numbers. I'm not good with numbers. This is not my thing. Because we don't get taught life skills, unfortunately. So it's really no one's thing unless you have a real passion for numbers and for maths. It's something that you really have to take upon yourself to actually educate yourself on finances. And that's where, as an accountant and certainly an outsourced CFO, it's our job to be that kind of teacher for you, to be that guidance and support to help bring you up to speed, and also to really navigate and sometimes translate a lot of this stuff, because look, tax legislation, you can read it up, down, back to front, and it still won't make any sense. So I get it. I totally get it.
Exactly. And if you want to be successful in business, you've got to have viability. It's number one, right? Especially when you go through ups and downs. And I think we all do in business, and I'm sure you have as well. It's when you start your own business and you're like, okay, I have these skills, I don't have all these skills. We kind of need other people to help us, but we can't always afford it, right? But yet we really need it, and especially the viability of a business. And I think that's where you come in with this CFO offer as well, not just the accounting offer, right?
Yeah, because look, you can have the best product in the world, best service in the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean your business will survive or thrive. So, even having the best product or idea, it comes down to financial hygiene. It comes down to habits and consistency. Net profit is not cash flow. They're not the same thing. So you need to be aware of each element and actually setting the foundations from the beginning, because that is what will help you certainly grow and scale, but also remain, viable and stable across. We've had a pretty tumultuous 5 or 6 years in the past, so it's really trying to be as robust as you can and flexible in case something like that were to happen again.
Yeah. Before I ask you about the challenge you face building your own business, because we all have them, what is the key thing coming out of the last 5, 6 years in Australia, but I guess also possibly in other countries as well? What are the key challenges you're seeing for businesses, the small to medium sized businesses coming out of the lockdowns in Australia?
Yeah, I think it was consistency and planning were, look, during the actual COVID period, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of unknown. We didn't know how long this was going to take, what the real impact was going to be. And look, for some businesses, they thrive. Some businesses had the biggest 2 years of their whole entire business existence, and other businesses closed their doors. So it wasn't necessarily one size fit all. However, what we have seen post COVID is, I think everyone thought, well, now that that's over, the hard part is done. But it is certainly almost, I would say 2025 was one of the hardest years, and that cash flow was really tight. There's also been some changes around, with the ATO, with their interest remissions and deductibility of interest, but also just them clamping down because debts are so high that all of these things then came back to affect our cash flow. Didn't really matter how well you're doing in your business. If you don't have any liquidity in the business and any, excess cash flow, you could be either heading into business finance, you could be heading into multiple payment plans with the ATO. And so that lack of planning or sort of consistently putting away and providing for the future has sort of, come full circle. And that's what I think we're seeing. We certainly did see, last year and potentially again this year.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point, is that, yes, there was a situation where we all went, wow, okay, let's just deal with it. And then we thought we're out of it. Yeah. And then suddenly it's like, here comes the backlash of it, right? The longer term implication that we all had to deal with and try to navigate, depending on what business we're in, of course. And I'm not saying that people who are doing successfully well, very well. Now, in terms of your business, how long have you been in business for?
Just over 3 years. So heading into the 4th year this year.
Right. So you started literally coming out of COVID, right?
Yeah, 2022. So just at the back end, of it.
Wow, what a fantastic time and different times to start in. But what have you learned? What has been one of your big challenges? Because even though you're amazing with finances, it's sometimes, I think, different when it's our own business in terms of going, okay, how do I best navigate this business?
Yeah, I think for me and I've had this question a lot. People are like, how have you found it? It's so tough and difficult. And I think, look, being an accountant and with the history that I did have, the 15 years of experience running, financially running my business has not been the biggest issue for me. It hasn't been the baptism of fire that is for most people. And I totally appreciate that, because if you don't know how to deal with the ATO, if you don't know, the reporting cycles, it's a lot. It's constantly, It's like at least every quarter, if not more frequently. So for me, that wasn't necessarily the hardest part. The hardest part, I think, was, I came out of 15 years of corporate. So I had always presented, or I'd always sort of thought of myself in a certain way, sort of molded myself into a certain shape. And then I got to business ownership and I was like, oh, none of this now is relevant. Like that's actually not even who I am. So for me, it's probably more around the psychological changes in thinking like a business owner rather than thinking like an employee in a big multinational firm. And all the sort of support and guidance that comes with that. Obviously, as a solopreneur, you're very much on your own, and all the decisions are yours. So you don't necessarily have people to, test those with, or am I being reasonable? And I think a lot of, sort of self-doubt and a lot of self-criticism can come in if you're not, really resilient, or you don't have a good sense of self. And I think too, one thing that I certainly actually didn't suffer from in the first couple of years, but as the business grew and as I spent more time as a business owner, that comparison to other businesses and to other business owners, I think, crept in. As I started sitting in bigger rooms and sitting with people that had bigger businesses and talking about some of the things that they were doing, I started to look at that and go, well, should I be doing that? Or like, if I'm not doing that, does that mean I'm doing something wrong. So it was those sorts of things creeping in, which, they say comparison is the thief of joy, and it very much is. You start comparing yourself to other people and it will very quickly derail pretty much everything and anything.
I totally agree with you, because one thing that I found was my biggest challenge, and it probably feeds into what you're saying, is that finding my self-worth and knowing that I'm good enough on my own, that I can do it, that I'm smart, that I'm great at what I do, that I can learn new skills and I can become good at things I don't know, right? It requires a lot of self-confidence, and I think also courage, because suddenly it's us, there's no one to blame it on anymore. And it can get very lonely, and it's like, wow. Yeah. And some days I just think, let me just hide away. Not so much anymore, but in the beginning where it's like, let's just hide away. This is too much. What if they don't like it? If I got critiqued or whatever? And suddenly it's like, no, I gotta trust that if I sit with the big giants, I can become one of the big giants, and that I'm just as capable as everyone else, right?
Absolutely. And I think if you want to, like a lot about what you spoke about and, sort of that self-value, if you want to put a number on it, what I see a lot is people not charging appropriately for their time. So when you think about an hourly rate, you talk about, well, what's your hourly rate? What's my hourly rate? You often see people have discounted that rate to a third of what it should be, a quarter of what it should be. And they're spending whole days working with people or businesses, and they're 2 to 3 to 4 times undervalued for what they really should be sort of putting forward in those situations. So that's a big indication. And I guess that's one thing where I definitely didn't have it nailed from the first day of business, but it's now something that I'm very strong on. I do have very strong boundaries around that. I have an hourly rate. Most of my fees are fixed, but if I do need to provide an hourly rate, that's it. There's kind of no bartering on that. It is what it is, and that's how I sort of measure my self-worth.
And it's so important, because it is so true. If we're dealing with small business owners as your clients, or even maybe medium size, not the corporates, they know what the price is. I think generally they may try and bargain with you, but they will work that out. You can work that out with them. They have bigger budgets in general. Right. But I have found one, like, for example, with strategy, people don't really understand strategy, let alone the value of it. And I think you're talking about hourly rate, and people are very fixated on, oh yeah, what's your hourly rate? It's like, if you just measure it on if we're just going on hourly rate, then you can only go so far as well versus the value if you actually price yourself on value. And I did actually a class on pricing last week. Not that that's my specialty, but I did one anyway in my community. Yep. And I found the research, and 80% of small business owners and medium small business owners are underpricing themselves.
Does not surprise me at all. I say it all the time.
And that's the thing. And it comes back to believing in our value and understanding our value, our worth as a business owner, as a service or product that we offer. And it also really, I think we have to think about how we can change the perception around what's your hourly rate to what charging by value. What is the outcome you're going to get from working, for example, with me or having your service, right? What's the outcome?
I think it's and that's certainly important with the when you're dealing with the potential client or whatever it is. But I think what is equally important, maybe more so, is how you're valuing your time. So making sure that you are negotiating. If they say, okay, well, we don't want to spend that much, that doesn't mean that you do the same amount of hours but for a reduced rate. It just means you do less. Like you need to make sure that you're maintaining the same value, but you physically go, okay, well, if you don't want to spend $10,000 with me, then we can halve that and do 5,000. But it means I do half as much work.
Yeah. So it's making this is what you're going to get from that,
yeah. Otherwise, because that's what you see. You see people going, oh, it's $10,000, and then they're like, oh, well, we don't want to spend that much, so they'll halve it. You've just halved your value by just doing the same amount of time at half the rate. So that's where you want to make sure that creep isn't actually devaluing who you are and the value that you're providing.
And I think, and I trust, I think we can all understand that, especially as we're talking about it. We get it, right? We get it. We understand it. And I'm sure the listeners here can understand it too. But then comes those times where you actually have to set those boundaries, right? And there's one thing in terms of I understand my values, but now, given that I'm in business and I don't want to lose the business, right? If we want clients in and we're going, do I need the client versus the money versus setting my boundaries? And then how do I set those boundaries without losing the client? And to being strong enough in ourselves to stand, not just know our value, but stand up for our value.
Yeah, and that comes back to, what you said before about courage. That takes a lot of courage to back yourself, back your decisions and go, you know what, this doesn't work for me. Maybe they're not my ideal client, or that's not something I'm willing to entertain. Look, I get it. Like I would say the first 2 years, I took everything. I really did. I didn't say no to a single thing. I took every client, whether it was, small, medium, large. That has changed. In towards the back end of the second year, I said, I'm no longer now going to work with just individuals with employment income. So that was kind of the first sort of boundary setting. And then it's just, I steadily have been, I guess, incrementally increasing that depending on, so now, my target client might be $1 million plus revenue, and you sort of just slowly move into another bracket. But it's like a muscle. You've got to exercise it. You've got to keep boundary setting to get more and more comfortable with it. And then eventually you'll be fine with it. But initially it's pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I'm so into energy as well, beyond just what we can see, because we're energetic beings. And I do believe the more we stand in ourselves, the more we value ourselves, the more we start attracting people who can see the same value, right? But that's not something that, if visible, is something we have to trust in our energy, that we're going to bring in the right people. And sometimes it also comes down to your point. We actually have to reevaluate who is your ideal customers. Because if your ideal customers can't afford more than, very, very little, and your value is up here, then there's not a match. It's not aligned. Yeah.
Exactly.
Even if you gave them everything, which I've done as well, giving them everything for very little money, guess what? It goes straight out the door because they never valued it in the first place.
Well, that's right, because you're actually then devaluing that product or service. It's like when they talk about, brands and when they go on sale. People will hold out for sales because they're like, oh, it's going to come on 50% off. But then as soon as obviously that sale ends, it's devalued that product because they're not willing then to pay full price for it, knowing that it's going to come on sale every Black Friday or over the Christmas period or whatever it is. So you have to be very conscious of that. But absolutely, if you need to keep reassessing, if what was a client, which was an ideal client for you a year ago, is no longer an ideal client, you need to assess that, and you need to move on, and you need to move up to the next bracket or whatever that might be, because that's, chances are those smaller clients now, they're actually probably costing you money. By the time that, you might give them a lot of value for a small fee, chances are they're actually taking from you rather than giving to you.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily come with gratitude or awareness that they're doing it either, right? Because we already sold ourselves for too low.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's a big, and I've had the same learning in business, and it is a big learning, and it's not necessarily one that comes overnight, like you said, and doing it to the point where you go, hold on, no. But of course, I understand people go, well, I need the money, right? But then, like you said, then you got to cut down how much you offer them.
Correct. And I think, look, I remember I spoke to someone once, another business owner, and their question was to the group, they were like, look, they were disruptors in their industry. They did things very differently, but they were doing incredibly well. They were living a very balanced life. They were making good money. There was really nothing wrong with either what they were doing or their business. But they were kind of worried. It was this comparison thing again. They were kind of worried that because they're not doing what everyone else is doing, are they actually doing all the right things, and could they be making more money or whatever it was? But and we sort of said to them, I said, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So yes, you're a disruptor, and every industry has one of those. But if that is working, if you've got great work-life balance, you're making good money, and there's literally nothing kind of wrong with the whole setup, just because you are different doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
So I think that's also, again, that comparison. Just because you may be doing something different to literally everyone else around you. Look, if you're not making money, that's different. And we need to have a chat. But, you know, in this scenario, it was like, there's actually really nothing to worry about, because you're actually probably outperforming everyone around you just because you're doing things so differently.
And I love that, because having the courage to stand for who we are and creating something that is different in the category takes courage. And it's so easy to, like you said, start comparing to everyone else. But we are not everyone else. And our product and service isn't everyone else. So letting go of comparison is hard, but I can understand in terms of we go, well, should I be doing the same? But it's like, not if you want to stand out, you know, and if you don't have a lot of money to spend on advertising, etc., then, and you understand your target market and what the value that you're offering them is, and they like it and they will pay for it, well, then you're onto something, right? And it doesn't mean you should stand still per se if it's working great, but you can carry on, but focus on who you are and what you enjoy. Because I've come to the place of, do I just want a business to make money, or do I want something I enjoy doing?
Correct. Yeah. Well, look, you spend the majority of your life doing this, unless you're going to retire early. So you need to enjoy it, right? You need to want to show up every day. You want to show up as your best self and give your clients and your staff and those around you your best self. And the only way to do that is to love what you do and be passionate about what you do. Yeah. And that just makes everything kind of easier. But yeah, and I think any business's superpower is its founder. You know, it's who you are. It's what you stand for. It's how you like to connect with people and interact with people. And I think a lot of the time we take that for granted, that, you know, we are so all uniquely human. There's only one of us, unless you have an identical twin, but there's only one of us. And that's who that people are interacting with. That's who clients and customers want to do business with. So yeah, use that. Use your superpower and make the most of it.
Totally agree. I couldn't agree anymore. And of course, it's extra important in a service business, but it also applies to product businesses when you're starting out and you're the founder. And I have clients that are like, well, I don't want to be the brand. I'm like, well, when you're starting out, you kind of are the brand a little bit, and people need to emotionally engage with you. You can't get AI to do everything. They still need that human contact. And in the world of AI, we need more human connection. That's what people crave. So you got to find a way, even as a product offer online, you got to find a way to put some of your magic into that brand. And whilst you're a small business, it kind of comes back to the founder a little bit. There's obviously different ways of packaging it up, so it's less about the founder, but we still want their values, we want their ingenuity, we want their creativity, we want their personality into it, right?
Absolutely. 100%. And you see it very, very blatantly on social media. So, you know, through whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, people follow people. They don't really follow brands. And when I say that, when we're talking about small business, you know, people follow me as the founder of Bond Financial. They're not necessarily following just Bond Financial as a brand. And you certainly see that with, you know, all in any industry. But also, you know, I had a client, and they're in a product. They sell they're like a small resi builder, and they were updating the website. And I was like, look, there's all these beautiful photos of what you do and, you know, all the things that you build. But I'm like, where are you? Where are you guys? You know, where are you guys as the founders? Where are you as the team? That's actually where people are going to connect. Like, we need to see you. We need to know about you and your values and who you are. You know, you've got a family, like all that sort of thing. So, because that's where, people want to see the people behind the product or the service, because that's exactly what that's what they're going to connect with. They're not going to connect with a house, you know, like they're going to connect with a person, or they're not going to connect with your business activity statement services like they're going to connect with me, you know. So it's got to be about you.
And especially when they don't know you, right? Once they start using your product or service, obviously that comes into it. But before that, the way to build know, like, and trust, which has never gone out of fashion, is partially or very much at the beginning through the founder.
Correct. Yeah.
So I completely understand and love those principles and learnings as well. We're actually running out of time already, but I could keep talking to you. And thankfully, the internet seemed to have played along.
I know.
Because it was very dodgy beforehand. So I'm very grateful
yeah.
for that. Thank you. I did put out the thank you for blessing us with good internet, and it did. So thank you very much. So before we go, Sarah, just a little bit, where can people find you? How can they reach out to you, etc.? And if they want to learn more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so look on LinkedIn. So there's both my personal page as well as the business page, and I think there's some details that run along the bottom of this.
Well, it just disappeared. There we go. Put it back.
There
It
you
just
go. Putting along in the banner. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. So the business page is Bond Financial Sydney on Instagram, and otherwise there's a website, so bondfinancial.com.au. And look, our ideal client is, you know, founders who either don't have a team at all and they're still doing all of it. They're wearing all the hats, trying to do it all, and work out that, you know, how to do it all, or they have a small team but they still need some guidance. They need some, you know, sort of director level sort of management reporting, or like I said, accountability to looking forward, because that's the thing, like with the tax side of the business, it's always past looking. There's only so much we can fix. There's only so much we can unstitch and undo. The past has been done, but with CFO, it's forward looking. So it's looking at, well, how can we write the future together before it's happened so that we get the best result.
I love that, because this means we can take charge of the future, and we can't completely guarantee what happens in the future. Correct. But we can set ourselves up for the potentially best way to handle the future and grow from it at the same time, right?
Exactly. And look, there's always going to be surprises, who saw COVID coming, but at least you can be a bit more flexible should something happen or something come up. And it makes these things less, impactful if you can just be.
It makes us feel a little bit more in control, even though we don't really control in life. It can make us feel a bit more control, and then we all that feeling, hey. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm so thankful to the internet to play along.
Yes, it's turned out wonderfully. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone listening in and listening later. We appreciate you.
Thanks.